Today, a different narrative of Donald Trump is unfolding, and it's the one he has dreaded. Not the gold-tinged billionaire businessman, not the president of the United States, not the TV celebrity, but citizen Trump, defendant Trump. A man who so convincingly turned lies into an accepted narrative, now forced to face truth in a court of law. And he doesn't like it.
I'm now going to sit down for many hours. I am now going to sit down. The voters understand it. All you have to do is look at the polls. This is a sham trial, and the judge should recuse himself because it's totally conflicted.
Now the strength and sometimes belligerence he likes to project is muffled as he's forced to sit behind a defense table, seen repeatedly with his eyes closed and clearly frustrated that Judge Juan Merchan, not he, has control in that room. And that's before the trial phase begins, when he will have to listen to a string of witnesses testifying about events that could land him in prison. Still to be seen is how that view of Trump plays, not just with jurors, but also with voters, of course, because after all the waiting and all the speculation surrounding Donald Trump on trial, it's about to get real. NBC's Garrett Haake is back with us. Sam Stein is Politico's deputy managing editor for politics and an MSNBC contributor. Barbara McQuade is former U.S. attorney and MSNBC legal analyst. You know, Sam, Donald Trump is used to being the boss of his company, being able to say whatever he wants. That is not the case in court, which is, of course, the judge's domain. How could that unfamiliar role, do you think, play with him?
Well, first of all, I don't think anyone is comfortable if they're sitting in a criminal court proceeding, so I'll give that to him. But I think your point is extremely valid, which is for, 40, 50 years, no one has talked back to Donald Trump. He's run his own company. It's a family business, but it was his. He was a, television personality where the show was literally about him telling people they were fired or hired. He ran for president, defied expectations, and then was president, the most powerful person in the planet. And so in those capacities, you don't really ever get told to sit quietly at a table or risk being sanctioned. You don't ever get told that your freedom is on the line and it's not in your hands, but it's in the hands of others. And so this is deeply unfamiliar territory to him. And I have to imagine, I can't get into his psyche, but I have to imagine that it's a bit of a hit to the ego and psychologically disoriented. I mean, he is not in control of his future. He's handed that to his lawyers, and he has a jury that will have to ultimately decide his fate. And that's just not a position he's been in for his entire life, let alone the last 40, 50 years.
We already know, Garrett, that there has been concern in Trump world and among a number of Republicans about what this trial could mean for November, for them as well as for Donald Trump. But have you heard any worries about how his behavior in and out of court could change perceptions of him?
Yeah, look, I mean, there's certainly an element of that, Chris. So the campaign and Donald Trump in particular have tried very hard, going back for more than a year now, to cast this trial in a very specific light. The idea that it is Joe Biden versus Donald Trump, regardless of what the legal facts may be here. But how he conducts himself in this courtroom, even away from the cameras, could infringe upon the narrative that they're trying to set up. We know this because we've already seen it happen once in a much less high-profile case in which he was, going back and forth repeatedly with the judge in the E. Jean Carroll case in such a way that he was admonished and told he could be removed from the room. Now, that was a case that didn't have even perhaps a quarter of the attention that a case like this does, when the eyes of the entire country are watching, at least to some degree, what's going on inside this courtroom and what's going on outside of it. We also just don't know what the prolonged exposure to these kinds of images of a former president, a current presidential candidate, even coming and going from court in a way that could potentially diminish anyone might play. So I think that's very much on the minds of the Trump campaign. And we know this in part because they spent much of the last 2 weeks preparing him for trial. They gave almost no details about what that preparation looks like. But just the fact that he was not actively campaigning all that much and much more heavily focused on what's going to be going on inside that courtroom suggests to me they are well aware of the stakes, whatever their public posture might be otherwise.
So tell me if I'm right about this, Barbara, or if I've just watched too many police procedurals. And that is that a lawyer, before a defendant goes into court, will talk to them about how the jury might judge them based on the way they look, based on their demeanor, based on even maybe their body language. how much of that is true and how big of a concern can that be for Donald Trump? Because we know when he was in his civil case, there were moments when he was less than, let's say, diplomatic.
Oh, absolutely. Not only do they talk about how they should appear in court, they even talk about how they should appear going in and out of court. You will often see a client and their lawyer walking into court trying to look confident, smiling, not looking fearful. I think they want to project confidence that they will prevail in this case. In the courtroom, I think it's important to counsel a client that you should assume that the jury is watching you at all times. I've talked to juries after they have served and rendered verdicts, and it's amazing all the details they pick up on. You know, we noticed you got a haircut halfway through the trial, or we noticed that you used a different water bottle starting with week 3 than you were using weeks 1 through 2. So they notice everything. There's a lot of downtime. There's a lot of tedium. And so they're watching. And so body language can be very important. I think that, a client needs to look like they're respecting the process, that they're confident, perhaps that they're involved in their defense. And I think that if I were advising Donald Trump in this instance, I would be sharing with him those views and reminding him to be on his best behavior at all times.
Sam, your Politico colleagues write about the lack of a strong pro-Trump showing outside of the courthouse. Quote, in the past, Trump has always been able to count on his supporters turning out en masse from his signature rallies to the right at the Capitol. But on Monday, at a pivotal moment for the MAGA movement and Trump's campaign, the faithful were uncharacteristically quiet. I mean, one part of it can be New York is very Democratic, but could we be seeing signs of a wider exhaustion with Trumpian chaos, maybe, Sam?
I was going to say, New York is not exactly the bastion of MAGA movement here, but I will say there are signs of general fatigue around all this stuff. I mean, if you look, it's not an apples to apples, but if you look at the grassroots online fundraising numbers, for instance, they are down significantly on both sides, but also more so on the Republican side of the ledger. I think part of that is that, for years upon years, Republicans, primarily Donald Trump, have issued these calls of him being persecuted and prosecuted, of it being a witch hunt, of Joe Biden being out to get him, of his freedom being on the line, of him standing up for you, not them, and all these types of pleas for giving. And I think a lot of people, obviously the diehard and the faithful, continue to believe it. They continue to rally to his cause. But I think it's exhausted a fair number of people, too. And you see that in those fundraising numbers. To a lesser degree, you see it in the fact that they can't gin up the protests outside the courthouse here, even if it is New York.
Garrett Haake, Sam Stein, Barbara McQuaid, you guys are great. It just occurred to me, Barbara, I think that you and your Sisters-in-Law podcast folks, Jill and Kimberly and Joyce, should write a police procedural. I would watch that.
I'd watch it.
Just saying, I'll take that. I won't even take 10%. I'll take 5%. Thank you all so much for that.
Hey, everyone. MSNBC has a new and improved app. You'll get real-time alerts and analysis, live blogs, in-depth essays, video highlights, and the best 2024 election coverage. Download the new MSNBC app. Here's how to do it. You tap on the App Store on your phone. You hit search on the bottom right corner. You type in MSNBC. You click on the MSNBC app. You click on Get or the cloud icon and enjoy it.